We've applied some of those same skills from the U.S. energy market and building models around supply-demand balances to forecast forward into next year so that we can be thoughtful with our clients. Our expectation is that by 2027, there's going to be a significant number of hours during the middle of the day on a regular basis that are going to be negative. Hello, everyone. I'm John Knorring, Chief Executive Officer and founder of Green Tiger Markets, and you're tuned in to Power Podcast.
Welcome to Power Podcast. This is a channel where you can listen to in-depth discussions of issues relevant to the Philippines energy sector. Power Podcast is a production of Power Philippines, the only online publication in the country dedicated to covering energy development across the archipelago. We cover all news and issues that spark meaningful conversations among members of our growing online community. We share the belief that sustaining the growth of the energy sector is vital to the growth of the country itself. Welcome to Power Podcast, where we dig into the forces shaping the energy sector, innovation in markets, and how smart players are navigating volatility and opportunity. I'm Mai Tanglao, and today we have a special episode with Green Tiger Markets, a pioneering marketplace that's turning heads in the Philippine electricity space. Now, when you hear GTM, you might think go-to-market. But here it stands for Green Tiger Markets, a Singapore-based derivatives marketplace that's bringing forward contracts to the Philippine power sector. Since launching the Philippines' first exchange-based forward electricity market in 2023, GTM has allowed generators, industrial consumers, and utilities to hedge against the wild swings of spot electricity pricing. Through its contracts for difference, participants can lock in pricing ahead of time without having to change the physical flow of power. Think of it as a financial insurance in an unpredictable energy landscape. In a market like the Philippine WESM, prices fluctuate wildly due to supply, weather, grid constraints, renewable output, and that volatility makes planning and financing new projects risky. GTM seeks to tame that uncertainty. Today, we're going to unpack how GTM's platform works, who benefits, how this impacts investment and renewables in the Philippines, and what challenges lie ahead. Joining us is John Knorring, CEO and founder of Green Tiger Markets, who will walk us through their journey, vision, and what's next. Hi, John. Thank you for being with us today. So let's start the ball rolling, and we're going to shoot our first question. For people new to the sector, how exactly is electricity bought in the Philippines? Who buys, who sells, and what prices? And what does the WESM or what role does WESM play, and why do prices swing so dramatically from negative to record highs?
Sure. Well, first, I want to say thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I'm really looking forward to today's conversation. So there were a handful of questions in there. So who buys and who sells electricity in the Philippines? The sellers are generally generators. So think Aboitiz Power, San Miguel, First Gen, firms like that. They're generating electricity. And the buyers are either the DUs or the electricity cooperatives or the retail, the retail electricity suppliers. And so all of them have different agendas on what they're trying to do, but for the most part, it's a pretty standard setup as far as competitive markets go. And most of the transactions historically have been done on what's called a long-term PSA. But in addition to that, firms like Meralco, for example, will do a CSP, a competitive selection process, to buy large blocks of power for long periods of time. But that's all changing. And that's largely what Green Tiger Markets is bringing to the Philippines electricity market. And the Philippines market is going through a really interesting transition right now. Historically, there were long-term PSAs. But with Apira and the advent of the WESM spot market in 2006, it allowed for load balancing to happen on an essentially instantaneous basis. You didn't need these long-term contracts that were difficult to negotiate. You could just deliver into the spot market. But the challenge is that the spot market is very volatile, and we'll get to that part of your question in just a second. And so places like the U.S. where I live in Texas, went through this transition in the 1990s. The same transition happened in Europe in the early 2000s, and then you saw Australia and New Zealand, and more recently Japan, go through this transition from long-term contracting into a spot market and then a forwards market. And so what the forward market is instead of hedging the electricity risk on an instantaneous basis, you can do it for a week, a month, a year, 10 years, all at the same time. And that's really valuable to the market, that price certainty, because as you pointed out, the price is really volatile. And it's volatile because you can't really store electricity. Sure, there's batteries that are coming around, but in general, supply and demand needs to be met on a very short-term basis. Otherwise, you see blackouts or power surges, and that's just not acceptable for, you don't want your gadgets to essentially explode because there was a power surge. And so we see prices, the price floor as set by the ERC is on the order of minus 10. And the cap, I think it's now 35 pesos. It's in that general area. This past year, we haven't seen as many prices up at the price cap. We've actually seen quite a few at the price floor, which I think is exciting for Filipino consumers. Maybe I'll pause there.
Yeah. So you were talking about price volatility. Can you explain to us what happened during the Good Friday negative prices event, and why is this a big deal for the power sector?
Yeah, so Good Friday, we saw prices for not every hour of the day, but for a handful of hours clear at a negative price, which is a sign of an oversupplied market. And when you look at the installed capacity for the Philippines, there's been a few changes to it, and basically the fuel mix or the power supply mix over the last few years, and that's a huge amount of solar has come into the market. So you had the convergence of more supply coming from all these new solar panels, and then Good Friday, many businesses were closed, and so the demand was much lower. And so the market was forced to balance itself by moving the price down to force some of the thermal generators off the margin. And so it's exciting and terrifying, and I think it's a sign of things to come in the future. So as I said, I live in Texas, and 2 or 3 years ago, we had a huge amount of solar come into the market, and it vastly changed the prices. I mean, we used to see extremely high prices in the middle of the day during the summer. It's very hot where I live, and so $150, $200 per megawatt hour. And this summer, though it wasn't quite as hot as the last few years, the prices were on the order of $20. And that's largely driven by the fact that there's so much solar that's come in. California experienced the same thing, 5 to 10 years earlier, and the Philippines is right at that kind of inflection point in the market where the middle of the day went from being premium to being very, very discounted. And that has big implications, in particular because there is a lot of capital flowing into the solar sector, and many of those plants are merchant. And so they're just going to sell into the spot market. And I would imagine that when those decisions were made, they were made 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and when prices were really high. But the supply-demand balance has changed, and the economics of those projects does not look as good, unless they sold into the GAP, which those are, I would call them quite generous terms in terms of if you're thinking about deploying capital to sell 25 years, have the sovereign as your counterparty, and a really good price. That's pretty attractive, and that's largely why we're seeing so much new solar come into the market.
What happened during the Good Friday this year? That's something that will happen again?
Yeah, and not just Good Friday, but more days. And actually, if you examine the forward market and run some calculations. So before I started GTM, I was a commodities trader. And so I would take positions in mostly energy futures based on what I thought the future price of that energy would be. And so we would build models and decide, oh, hey, the crude price, it's $65 today. We think it's going to be $80 next year. So let's buy. We've applied some of those same skills from the U.S. energy market and building models around supply-demand balances to forecast forward into next year so that we can be thoughtful with our clients. And our expectation is that by 2027, there's going to be a significant number of hours during the middle of the day on a regular basis that are going to be negative.
I see. But apart from that, in your view, what is the single biggest weakness of the current spot market today?
The weakness of the spot market? That's a good question. Let me think about that. We can come back to it.
Okay. So now you already introduced Green Tiger Markets to us. What is GTM and how does it work? How are forward contracts different from WESM trading?
Sure. GTM is a platform where buyers and sellers of electricity, or firms that benefit from prices rising or falling, can meet to find a counterparty to hedge that risk on a forward basis. So the difference between the spot market and the forward market, and it's a really important one. You know, obviously IMOP runs the WESM spot market. They're doing load balancing, physical power. What we are doing is providing this venue where the buyers and sellers can meet and hedge the price exposure to the commodity Philippines electricity. And so to kind of close the loop on the power supply, power sales agreements, the PSAs, the long-term PSAs, those had all of the terms of physical delivery and force majeure and payment terms and price built into their contract as a whole. But they take a very long time to negotiate. The WESM spot market, you can just deliver in 5 minutes and 5 minutes later decide not to. So that decision making gets sped up, but there's the volatility. And so WESM handles the physical component of those PSAs, and GTM handles the price portion of those PSAs.
Who are your early adopters?
So we take client confidentiality very seriously. What I can say is we've registered for the platform about 70% of the installed capacity in the country. So there's roughly 30 gigs of generation here, and we've got a little over 20 of that in terms of if we look at client A, they have 5 gigawatts. All right, we put that in and add it all up, and it's in the low 20s, so it's about 70% of the installed capacity. On the demand side, we need to do better, and we do believe that there's big opportunities for some of the DUs to utilize services like GTM, because I mentioned living here in Metro Manila, you look at your power bill, and it's expensive, and two, it moves around.
Yes.
And so and in particular during the hot season, and so the reason is the utilities haven't hedged all of their exposure. But with GTM, it's just one click, and in about 200 milliseconds, you can match with a counterparty. And so that's very different from many months on these long-term PSAs.
For the on the seller side, do you mean generators?
Yeah, generators, yep.
But
And then the buy side, sorry to cut you off, reses. We have a few bulk users that are on the platform.
like factories,
yeah,
CNI.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
But can you share a real example of a company hedging through GTM?
Yeah. On the GTM market right now, we have clients that are willing to pay 4.2 for baseload Luzon power for next year. We have clients that are willing to sell at around 4.5 to 4.6. And so that's the existing market, the bid and the offer that is published to all the market participants. We did a transaction, when I think about the first transaction that we did back in 2023, we had a res that was looking to buy, and because they had exposure, if the spot price was high, they lost money. And we had a generator who said, you know what, I've got a little bit of excess capacity. I'm willing to sell financially some power and guarantee the price that I'm going to get. And so the res bought, I'm trying to remember, I believe it was 5 megawatts for August through December. And the price that was transacted actually ended up being, in hindsight, a fairly high price. And we spoke with the res and said, hey, we know that the contract that you entered into on GTM, you lost money on that specific deal. How is management thinking about it? And they said, oh no, it was great. Even though we lost money on it, they said, well, we were able to buy on GTM and do a new piece of business that we wouldn't have otherwise been able to do because we didn't want to take the risk of prices really spiking. And so they said, hey, we lost on GTM, but we made a lot with our new customer. And hearing stories like that, it's like, okay, that's how it's supposed to work.
And what does the first ever midday trade signal about market maturity?
Yeah, so in 2024, so when we launched GTM, we launched with baseload contracts. So that's just a flat 24/7 monthly contract. What we found, and partially due to more solar coming into the market, was the day was being broken up into kind of 3 different segments instead of on peak, off peak. And so we said, all right, let's break up the day into 3 8-hour blocks. And so there's the morning block, which is midnight to 8 a.m. There's the midday block, which is 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., and then the evening, 4 p.m. to midnight. And the midday contract is one that solar developers and firms that are in the market, at least on the sell side, have been interested in utilizing. And on the buy side, there's also some developers who have delayed projects and they don't want to be exposed to the price. So they're using the midday contract. And then we see reses that have more demand during the middle of the day, so they're willing to buy. And I think it signifies that the market is developing the risk, the sophistication of the Philippines electricity market is really growing very rapidly as these new tools become available. But it facilitates business being done. And back to the point about 200 milliseconds to execute a trade, that's very different than many, many months. It's a little scary for some of the clients, actually. Things happen fast, but 200 milliseconds here would be extremely slow compared to execution times in the U.S.
So you already mentioned how solar developers are taking advantage of this, but how about the wind developers?
Yeah, so the wind is a little bit more of a challenge than solar because it's at least somewhat predictable that I'm pretty confident that tomorrow the sun's going to come up. Now, it might be a day like today where it's very cloudy, and so the amount that I'm able to generate with my solar panels would be lower today than it was on a sunny day a few weeks ago.
To expound on the CFDs?
Yeah, so prices in 2023 and 2024 were very high due to exogenous factors like the Ukraine war, which pushed coal prices up and LNG prices up, and that had follow-through impacts to push up the power price here in the Philippines. Now, what we're seeing in the market today and on a go-forward basis is that instead of the market being tight in terms of not having enough generating capacity relative to the demand, it's actually becoming pretty loose. And so looser supply-demand balances are generally lead to lower prices. And so for wind developers to be able to hedge out the price risk that they have is really important to their businesses. So we were talking about Good Friday earlier with negative prices. If a wind developer is generating a lot of electricity and the prices are negative, that's really bad. And so the idea is, all right, well, how do they mitigate that risk? And GTM is one way that they can do it. It's a little bit for a wind developer. It's a little bit of a blunt tool, but it is effective. And if prices generally are lower next year and the year after, and the wind developer has hedged at current market levels, they will receive that financial benefit or from the contract that they entered into on GTM, offsetting some of the bad outcomes in the realized price that they have when they deliver their electrons to the spot market.
Okay. So you mentioned a while ago forward contracts.
Yep.
And as you call here in the Philippines, it's called contracts for difference.
Mm-hmm.
So can you expound on that?
Yeah, so essentially a contract for difference is a financial agreement between two parties where we agree today on a reference period and a reference price. So on GTM, we have monthly contracts. The location is either Luzon, Visayas, or Mindanao. The reference terms are the WESM spot market prices. And that contract is a financial contract. So what that means is there's no electrons that are exchanged. So if I bought and you sold, I would the simple benefit is, okay, if prices are high, I would benefit from that. And if prices are low, you would benefit from that. But it has nothing to do with how many megawatts I'm generating or how many you're consuming. We just agree today on a price, quantity, term, location. And so what GTM has done is standardized all those into very simple and easily digestible pieces.
And if I agree to sell it at this price, for example, 5 pesos per kilowatt hour, and the WESM price by the period that we agreed on, it's not at 5 pesos per kilowatt hour. What happens with the CFD?
Yeah, so let's just say the month of September just finished. The base load price for September, I believe, was around 2.6. Had we entered into a CFD on GTM maybe a few months ago at 5 pesos, and I bought and you sold, I would owe you the difference between the transacted price, 5, and 2.6, or where the WESM spot market ended up finishing up. So that's 2.4 pesos, and then we multiply that by the number of megawatt hours in the reference period, which I believe the September contract has 744 hours. So if we did 1 megawatt, it would be 744 times 5 pesos minus 2.6.
So how do you respond to fears that derivatives are too complex or risky?
I think there's a lot of things that I don't know much about, and I'm therefore afraid of them. And when I become more exposed to them and learn about some of these things, I was always terrified of heights. But I learned about being in the mountains and the things that are happening in your head, and started pushing myself to sort of absorb that. And so as I became more comfortable with that, I became less fearful. And so for derivatives, if you don't know much about them, they sound scary.
Yeah.
Because it's likely that if you have heard of them, it's because they did not go well for somebody. And Warren Buffett at one point said that derivatives are financial weapons of mass destruction. Now, at the same time, Berkshire Hathaway is a large user of the derivatives market. So it's a little bit of talking out of both sides of his mouth. But that scares people. And what I would say is give us a call. We love talking about these markets, and we love teaching, and we want to get people comfortable with them. It is really important for us as a business that our clients understand what they're doing and knowingly enter into transactions and know what the outcome is going to be. They might not know whether they're going to make or lose on it, but they know that if the spot market is high, they benefit, and if it's low, they pay the counterparty. But it's really important that our clients have a good understanding of the products. We don't want them to use them unless they're willing to kind of do that hard work of becoming familiar with them.
I think my takeaway is that if there's something that scares you, or it's something that that's kind of intimidating, then that's more reason for you to study it. Actually,
That's right. I'm terrified of sharks, or I was terrified of sharks. But then, you read and you say, oh, well, how many shark attacks are there? There's not that many. They typically happen in, these conditions. And, when you get into the oceans here, you don't have much to worry about. And so, when I get into the ocean here in the Philippines, it's very relaxing. I'm not looking over my shoulder for jaws, so, yeah.
You mentioned already that you were trying to educate people.
Yes.
So how are you doing that? How are you making people, your customers, the sellers and the buyers, understand more about GTM? And also, is the platform very friendly?
So maybe I'll start with that last part. My business partner, Carlos, a co-founder of GTM, is expert in designing software platforms that are very user-friendly. And, I come from a commodities trading background where I'm used to systems being not necessarily that friendly. And when I use GTM, it's really simple to use. On the education side, that's coming from doing events like this. Well, for a while we were doing a lot of Zooms, but now we're doing a lot more in-person meetings. We had a meeting just yesterday with a large food and beverage client, and we asked them, okay, well, how do you source your power today? And they said, well, we source about half of it from a PSA, and the other half we just pull from the WESM spot market. And hearing that, the follow-up questions were, okay, well, if the price is high, is that bad for you? If the price is low, is that good for you? And it's yes to both of those questions. And then we say, well, if you could lock in today your price for next year, would you want to do that and have the certainty of knowing I'm going to pay $4.6 for base load power for 2026 in 20, 30, 40, 50 megawatts? And the answer is always a resounding yes. So that education process, it takes a lot of time. I talk fast. I lived in New York, and so but with in conjunction with my colleagues, we find multiple ways of explaining how it works, explaining the benefits, and then digging in on a real world example. When I mentioned I was a commodities trader, worked for Goldman Sachs for a number of years, and on a regular basis we were meeting with clients. Oh, you're a producer of natural gas. Here's the price for next year. Here's a few interesting things that you can do. Have you thought about these 5 aspects? And it was a lot of coaching that was done. And so, I used the word teaching earlier, but I think coaching might be a more appropriate adjective. And we, as a firm, we really enjoy that.
And Andrew's based here.
Yes,
I've seen
Andrew
him
Koger.
around,
He joined us earlier this year. He's fantastic. He's lived here in the Philippines for about 8 years or so. And, I'm always learning interesting things from him. He's a brilliant man, loves history, and is quite the bookworm. So
you have a great team.
Yeah,
Helping you out.
I got to tell you, when I worked at Goldman Sachs, we had a huge number of people, very high quality, very smart, very driven, and really excellent at what they did. And when I left Goldman Sachs, there was a little bit of a kind of hole in my heart to some extent. With GTM, we're very careful on the people that we hire because we expect high performance out of them, the utmost of ethics and honesty, but also to be able to serve our clients, think creatively. And when you look at the resumes of my colleagues, Andrew's a Princeton guy.
Wow.
I was a Princeton guy. Carlos went to Harvard.
Wow.
And Oliver, our general counsel, is a Cambridge man. So
impressive.
yeah, so of the four, senior people at GTM, they're all from, hailing from the top institutions. But importantly, it wasn't just, hey, they went to a good school. Oliver was the lead counsel for Goldman Sachs in Singapore and handled all of the basically Asia Pacific commodities, legal stuff that would come up. Carlos was an executive at American Express and essentially built the entire payment system. And Andrew's a little bit younger, but he has a pretty impressive work resume as well. So it's a small team, but it's a very, very capable team. And I mentioned, hey, I had this kind of hole in my heart that was after leaving Goldman. And even though our team is small, it's always, I talk to my parents and I say, oh, I got a chance to talk with Carlos for a couple hours today. That was a lot of fun. So it's a really solid team.
And GTM is the only company that's doing this type of service in the Philippines, right?
Yeah, that's correct. We're the first and only marketplace for hedging forward price exposure. And so we get a lot of questions about it. Hey, doesn't IMOP do this? Isn't this what IMOP does? Isn't this the same as WESM? And it's not. It's quite different. And in fact, in nearly every electricity market around the world that has a spot market and a forward market, it's two different companies that are running them. So I live in Texas. ERCOT runs the spot market, and Intercontinental Exchange runs the forward market. The skills required to run the spot market are very different from the skills required to running the forward market. And basically the knowledge base required is entirely different. Thinking about marketing or coaching, it's very different coaching about spot versus forward. So yeah.
But you're already growing your clientele, so are you not afraid of competition coming in?
Actually, I'm not afraid of competition at all. And in fact, if somebody called up and said, hey, we want to compete, I would say, okay, well, here's every email that we've ever sent at GTM. Here's our rule book. Here's the source code for our platform. We're still going to beat you because the one thing that a competitor can't do is that idea of coaching. And the expertise from the potential competitors. I mean, I manage billions of dollars of price risk in the U.S. nat gas market, and have seen markets that exploded higher and markets that completely collapsed, and have been on the right and wrong side of both of those. That is not a skill set that is commonly found at marketplaces like GTM, and it's really our competitive advantage.
So how can the Philippines learn from Australia, Europe, or Singapore?
Yeah, so those other markets, I think probably the best market that has kind of the most overlap is the U.S. market. And so the U.S. is the most advanced of all global power markets. You have Intercontinental Exchange that's largely doing all of the forward markets. There's several different grids around the U.S. They each have different supply sources. So California, for example, has a lot of RE and much more than the Philippines has. Texas has about like a similar kind of ratio of solar to the rest of the grid. And then you see areas like on the East Coast, the Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland, PJM grid has an entirely different fuel mix. And so to be able to study those, hey, how did those markets develop? How did pricing develop? Because we see very different prices in Texas versus PJM and California, and those lessons will translate over to the Philippines, whether it's Luzon dislocating from Visayas pricing like we saw a month or two ago. There's a lot to be learned from the U.S. markets.
So the Philippines has a 50% renewable energy target by 2040.
Mm-hmm.
How will GTM help us, the country, to achieve that target?
Yeah, so we don't build any generation, but what we do is we make it possible for firms to manage their risk. And so if, let's use an example of an oil driller, for example. The crude oil price today is about $65. If the price were $150 and I was capable of drilling for oil, I'd say, wow, that's a really good price. And alternatively, if the price was low, I'd say, you know what, I probably don't want to drill for oil. In fact, maybe I should get into a business that uses jet fuel or consumes it because it's a low price. The electricity market is no different. There's a government desire for more generation to come from the RE sector, but ultimately the developers are going to need to look at it and make an economic decision. Now, some of these GAPs make that decision making very easily. I mentioned earlier that these are fairly generous terms that are offered in the GAP. For firms that aren't able to access the GAP, their alternative is find a counterparty, do a long-term PSA that takes a really long time, or come on GTM and a couple of clicks be able to manage literally billions of pesos of market exposure to the price of electricity. So we're helping by helping risk get transferred from those that have it to those that need it.
When do you see ordinary households feeling the benefits
of GTM?
Yes.
Well, we don't have utilities, DUs signed up on GTM today. We're working on that. There are some households that have a res, and this new retail aggregation is going to be, I think, really impactful. Those households are able to shop for their power now instead of just having Meralco or whatever their local DU is. And there's lots of people, lots of firms, there's lots of reses out there that can supply the power.
Yeah, and more reses are signing up with
That's right.
platform.
Yeah. We have a significant portion of our client base is reses. And so the contracts that the reses can offer to those aggregated retail, if they don't have native generation, they're just exposed to the price, but they can go on to GTM to hedge, to lock in the price. And once they lock in on GTM, they can show a fixed price contract that the generation cost might be 4 pesos for the next few years. I think when you look at your Meralco bill, it's quite a lot higher than that. So the benefit will be felt by consumers as more reses get into it, and the retail aggregation makes a substantial dent in the existing DU business.
Okay, so calling all the reses, please
Yeah.
inquire.
Yeah.
Call John, Andrew, or Carlos.
Yeah.
Or even Oliver.
Yeah.
Inquire about GTM.
Yeah.
So now let's go to our quick fire.
Okay.
Okay, first question is, in one sentence, hedging is like
Good one. Like warm apple pie. No, I'm just kidding. Hedging is about managing risk.
coffee or tea, or what powers your tea?
Definitely coffee.
Me too.
Yeah?
Yeah. Black.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. What's one myth about electricity markets you wish people would stop?
One myth about electricity, that they need to have high prices. In terms of consumers, that the prices in the Philippines need to be high.
Yeah. There's something to be done.
Yeah.
There's something that can be done.
But lower prices aren't necessarily bad for generators if they are able to manage their price exposure. So, lower prices, they benefit the consumer. They can also benefit the generator if the generator has a thoughtful risk management strategy.
And that's where GTM comes in.
That's right. Sorry, not one sentence there. I'll shorten it up.
You're very adventurous.
Yes. Well, I mean, I'm here now. I'm halfway around the world. taking a big personal financial risk and career risk. I mean, like I said, I was working at places like Goldman Sachs, and this is a big risk for me personally. But I feel compelled that this is the right path for me, and to be able to bring that skill set here. I mean, I really love the Philippines. I've met so many nice people, and I really, really enjoy it here. And I want to see what I can do to help, if possible.
What book, podcast, or article recently made you think differently about the markets?
I saw the podcast with Donabelle, the Power Philippines podcast with Donabelle, and I'll be honest, I didn't actually know that much about Malampaya and the transaction that was done transferring some of the gas assets from first gen to prime. I learned a lot about it, and actually it makes me even more excited about the Philippines electricity market, because while there is a big push for RE, when you flip the lights on, you need the lights to turn on. And so that bridging that gap is going to come from natural gas, because natural gas is much more responsive than coal. And so for the near future, think 5, 10, 15, 20 years out, natural gas is going to be really important. And to see or to hear from Donabelle about what they're doing is really, really interesting.
What's harder, convincing regulators or convincing businesses to try something new? That's tricky.
Ooh, yeah, that's a little tricky. And I think we as a firm have learned a lot about working with both regulators. We're on a first name basis with most of the regulatory agencies, even though we're an offshore company. And the level of enthusiasm is and desire to work together is high. When it comes to the client base, the way that business is done here is very different from the U.S. And the trust dynamics between the clients and us is a really, really important factor here that I didn't appreciate when I first started the business. And I didn't realize how challenging it would be to adjust my thinking to the market. So I think they both have their challenges. Ultimately, the more aggressive companies come on very, very quickly. And the regulators, they have there's a process, and they follow it, which I think they should. So, yeah, I think the client base plays it's been easier.
What's one word to describe the Philippine energy market right now?
Exciting.
Exciting.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to see what's going to happen. The prices are different. We saw the price spike driven by the Ukraine war. We saw negative prices at Good Friday, and the market is in transition. Maybe I guess it's two words. In transition is maybe the words that I would use to describe the Philippines market.
What's the most surprising thing you've learned about running a power marketplace?
I think what sort of surprised me about running this market is that it requires, because this is a new idea for the Philippines, it requires a lot more coaching. And when I started GTM, I wasn't thinking that it would be as much coaching as it was, but it turns out I really enjoy it. I like it a lot. I like asking clients questions and helping them solve real world problems that they have, so that they can go out and produce more soda or whatever it is. And it surprised me how much coaching and how much I like it.
It's nice. You don't find it frustrating that the concept is very clear.
Yes, I mean, sure, it can be frustrating, and starting from square one, with every new client is can be frustrating. However, we've now done it enough times that we've kind of heard all the questions that get asked, and in fact, we can kind of predict the next question that the new potential client is going to ask. And so
I think that's going to be a challenge for someone to ask you something that you haven't heard before.
yeah, we haven't had a question definitely this year that we hadn't had before.
So who would you trade places with for one day and why?
In the Philippines power market or just in general?
Just in general.
Just in general. So I live in Austin, Texas. Joe Rogan lives in Austin, Texas. He's got a comedy club there. He's got the podcast. He is involved in mixed martial arts. I think he's got a pretty interesting life there. I think it would be for one day, not every day, but for one day, I think it would be interesting to step into
Joe
his shoes.
Rogan.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to your 25-year-old self about risk and opportunity?
Don't undervalue the cost to change. So I had a few opportunities to leave Goldman Sachs, 2, 3, 4 years out of school. I ended up staying there for almost 15 years. When I did leave, it was a great opportunity. I left on my own volition to go and try something new. But what I underestimated was basically kind of the institutional capital that I had, the relationships that I had made at Goldman, and going to a new place, I would need to rebuild that all over again. And that's not a cost that usually comes up. Most of the discussions with a new employer are, hey, what's the salary? But thinking about, hey, who are the people that I'm going to be working with? Who am I going to be either reporting to, or who is reporting to me? How can I make them better? Those are when you've been doing it at the same place for a little while, it becomes a lot easier. And reinventing yourself at a new institution is a challenge.
Okay, that's it. Maybe we can ask a parting message from you. Maybe you can address your potential clients, introduce GTM.
When it comes to the GTM market, for our existing clients, I encourage you to think about the exposure that you have to 2026 power. If prices are high, is that good for you? You should consider locking in. For new prospects, have a think about the risk that you're exposed to, and if prices are 5 or 6 pesos in the spot market next year, is that good for you or bad for you? If prices are similar to where they were on Good Friday, if that's bad for you, let's have a conversation. And so we're here. Our doors are open, and we're excited to learn more about our clients and help them in any way that we can.
That wraps up our conversation with Green Tiger Markets, a bold experiment in bringing financial tools to the Philippine electricity space. We hope this episode gave you fresh insight into how electricity markets and the risks behind them are evolving. When future markets meet electrons, the potential for stabilizing costs, spurring investments, or enabling cleaner energy becomes real. Thank you, John, for sharing your perspectives and experiences. And thanks to you, our listeners, for joining us in this journey into the future of energy markets. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to subscribe, share, and follow Power Philippines on Facebook and LinkedIn for more updates. For your comments and suggestions, shoot us a message on Power Philippines Facebook Messenger account or email us at news.powerph@gmail.com. And of course, stay updated on the country's energy sector by visiting powerphilippines.com
and by liking us on Facebook. If you want to view this podcast again, check out our YouTube channel at Power Philippines News. Until next time, I'm Mai Tangla.